Suddenly, right before his eyes, the door opened, and then he found himself being drawn upwards into the Spirit, and there was no time to call out to God or to beg for mercy. He just kept rising higher and higher until suddenly he was standing before a great white throne. And it happened so suddenly that John didn't have time to do anything but stare. The throne was shining with every precious stone that one could imagine, from the sparkling sheen of polished diamonds to the fiery glow of rubies and the cool serenity of sapphires. And around the base of the throne a rainbow shone with an emerald glow. But what truly held John's gaze was the one who sat upon the throne. For when John had been given the vision of the open door earlier, he had only seen the door itself and nothing more. But now, when he stood before the throne, his eyes were drawn to the majestic figure sitting there. The figure was cloaked in white robes that seemed to shimmer and flow like liquid starlight, and a golden belt was fastened around its waist. The face of the one on the throne was radiant, shining with a light that was both gentle and powerful, like the warm glow of the morning sun breaking through the clouds. And this light revealed not features that were harsh or stern, but rather an expression of overwhelming love and compassion. In those eyes John saw not judgment, but kindness and understanding. And in that moment he felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He knew instinctively that this was God, the Almighty, the Creator of all things, the one who had made the universe and everything in it. Yet there was something about God's presence that made John feel strangely unafraid. It was as though all the barriers and walls that he had built around his heart throughout his life were crumbling away, leaving him open and vulnerable before God. And as he stood there bathed in God's loving light, John felt a profound sense of shame and unworthiness wash over him. In that moment he was acutely aware of all the ways that he had strayed from God, all the times he had turned away from God's righteous path and followed his own desires. He thought of his pride and arrogance, his greed and selfishness, his anger and bitterness. And as these memories flooded his mind, John felt overwhelmed with remorse and despair. He wanted to hide, to escape God's presence, to flee from the suffocating weight of his own guilt. But even as these feelings threatened to consume him, another sensation began to grow within John, a tiny ember of hope amidst the ashes of his despair. For despite all his faults and failings, all his sins and shortcomings, John sensed that God's love and mercy were greater still. As he looked into the depths of God's compassionate eyes, he felt a surge of forgiveness and grace. It was as if God was reaching out to him across the gulf of his sin, offering him a lifeline of hope and redemption. And then, as if reading John's thoughts, God spoke. His voice was like the sound of 1,000 bells, clear and resonant, echoing with power and majesty. "John, my son, why do you fear? You have nothing to fear from me." John couldn't help but flinch at the sound of his voice. Despite the gentleness of God's words, there was an undeniable authority in his tone that commanded John's attention. It was the voice of the Almighty, the voice of the Creator, and yet it was a voice that spoke not with harshness, but with kindness and understanding. Gathering his courage, John managed to stammer out a response. "Lord, I am afraid because of my sins, because of all the things I have done wrong in my life. I feel unworthy to stand before you." As John spoke, he felt the weight of his sins pressing down on him like a heavy burden. He had strayed so far from God's righteous path, and now he stood before God, fully aware of the magnitude of his transgressions. God listened patiently, and when John had finished speaking, he responded in that same gentle voice, "John, my son, I understand your fear. You feel overwhelmed by your sins, by the things you have done wrong in your life. But remember, I am here to forgive you, to set you free from the burden of your guilt." As God spoke, a wave of warmth and peace washed over John, soothing the turmoil in his heart. God's words were like a balm to his wounded soul, a reminder that he was not beyond the reach of God's love and mercy. But John couldn't help but argue, "But Lord, my sins are too great. There are things I have done that I cannot undo. How can you forgive me?" His voice trembled with emotion, caught between fear and a desperate plea for mercy. John poured out his heart before God, acknowledging his sins while simultaneously grasping at the promise of forgiveness. He longed to believe in God's mercy, but his doubts and fears threatened to overwhelm him. God remained silent for a moment, allowing John's words to hang in the air, giving him time to process his emotions. Then, as if gently touching John's heart, God spoke once more. "John, my son, you are right. There are some things that cannot be undone. Some wounds cannot be healed. But that is why I have come for you. I have come to heal your wounds, to forgive your sins. You do not have to carry that burden alone." John stared back at God, his eyes wide with disbelief and burgeoning hope. Could it be true? Could God really forgive him, set him free from the chains of his past? Or were these just kind words, empty promises meant to lure him into a false sense of security? He wasn't sure. As John struggled with his doubts, God continued, his voice unwavering in its gentleness. "Do you not see that I have made a way for you? Do you not feel my love and forgiveness surrounding you? Let go of your fears, John, and step into the freedom that I offer you." John hesitated for a moment longer, weighing the hope offered by God against the doubts that still lingered in his heart. But as he looked into God's compassionate eyes, he saw nothing but love and acceptance. And so, with a trembling voice, he whispered, "I believe, Lord. Help my unbelief." A radiant smile spread across God's face, lighting up his countenance with joy. "Thank you, John," he said, his voice filled with warmth and kindness. "For in this moment of faith, I have washed your feet with water and set your spirit free. Now let us go. There is much to show you, much to discuss." Without waiting for a reply, God rose from his throne, and the moment John laid his gaze upon him, he found himself enveloped in a brilliant white light.